The summer air hung thick over Maplewood, Ohio, the kind that smelled like fried dough, sunscreen, and asphalt baking under a cloudless sky. The annual Founders Day Street Fair had swallowed the downtown blocks whole. Bright tents stretched corner to corner, children darted between legs with painted faces, and music pulsed from a local band set up on a flatbed truck. Officer Daniel Reyes moved slowly through the crowd, one hand resting on the leash, the other scanning faces. After 12 years on the force, he'd learned how to read a crowd the way some people read books, quick glances, body language, subtle shifts that told him when something was off. Beside him walked Rex. The German shepherd's black and tan coat gleamed in the sunlight, muscles rolling under tight skin with every step. Rex was calm, disciplined, the kind of K-9 other officers envied. Explosives detection, narcotics, search and rescue. Rex had passed every certification with near-perfect scores. Today was supposed to be easy. Just visibility. Just reassurance. Daniel nodded to vendors, smiled at kids who pointed excitedly at Rex, and returned casual greetings from parents who felt safer just seeing the badge and the dog. Then Rex stopped. Not gradually. Not distractedly. He froze. Daniel felt the leash go tight before he even looked down. Rex's ears snapped upright, his head tilting slightly, nostrils flaring as if the air itself had just spoken to him. "What is it, buddy?" Daniel murmured. Rex didn't look at him. 10 feet ahead, near a balloon stand bursting with color, stood a little boy. He was small, 6, maybe 7, wearing a blue t-shirt 2 sizes too big and sneakers with frayed laces. A red balloon bobbed weakly in his hand, the string wrapped tight around his fingers like he was afraid it might escape. The boy wasn't laughing. Wasn't calling for anyone. Wasn't moving at all. Rex let out a low whine. Daniel frowned. Rex didn't whine, not like that. It wasn't fear or excitement, it was tension, sharp and focused like a held breath. Then Rex barked. Not a warning bark. Not a trained alert bark. This was raw, loud, urgent. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A few parents instinctively pulled their kids closer. "Easy," Daniel said, tightening his grip. "Rex, heel." Rex ignored the command. The dog surged forward, barking again, louder this time, pulling Daniel half a step off balance. His paws scraped against the pavement as he strained toward the boy, eyes locked on him with an intensity that sent a ripple of unease through the surrounding crowd. "Whoa, control your dog," someone shouted. Daniel felt heat rise in his neck. "I've got him," he said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Rex barked again, sharp, repetitive, desperate. The boy finally looked up. His face was pale, almost gray under the summer sun. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, like he was staring through Rex instead of at him. The balloon string slipped slightly in his grip, but he didn't seem to notice. Daniel swallowed. Something wasn't right. "Rex," he commanded again, "down." Rex didn't sit. Didn't lie down. Instead, he circled the boy, nose low, sniffing rapidly, tail rigid. The barking stopped, but the urgency didn't. Rex let out a strained, high-pitched whimper, then pawed at the ground near the boy's feet. People backed away now, forming an uneasy ring. Phones came out, whispers spread. "Is the kid dangerous? Does he have something? Why's the dog freaking out like that?" Daniel felt every eye on him. He hated this, hated uncertainty, hated when the script broke. He approached the boy carefully, kneeling to bring himself level. "Hey there, champ," Daniel said gently. "You okay?" The boy blinked slowly. Up close, Daniel noticed details that twisted his gut. The faint sheen of sweat on the boy's forehead despite the mild breeze, the way his chest rose too fast, too shallow. His lips trembled, not from fear, but from effort. "Where's your mom or dad?" Daniel asked. The boy opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His fingers tightened around the balloon string until his knuckles went white. Rex pressed closer, nudging the boy's knee with his nose, whining again, louder now, pleading. Daniel felt torn in two directions. On one hand, procedure. An agitated K9 meant a potential threat. Unidentified child, unattended, backpack slung over one shoulder. Rex's nose kept drifting toward the bag. On the other hand, instinct. Rex wasn't acting aggressive. He wasn't guarding. He wasn't alerting the way he did with drugs or explosives. This was different. "Sir, what's going on?" a woman asked from the edge of the circle, clutching her toddler. Daniel forced calm into his voice, "Just checking on him." He turned back to the boy. "What's your name, buddy?" The boy's lips parted again, his eyes fluttered. Then his knees buckled. Daniel lunged forward just as the boy collapsed, the red balloon slipping free and floating upward, drifting uselessly above the crowd. Rex howled. The sound sliced through the fair like a siren, long, broken, panicked. It wasn't trained. It wasn't professional. It was fear. "Hey, kids, down!" someone yelled. Daniel caught the boy before his head hit the pavement, lowering him carefully onto his back. The child's body felt alarmingly light, alarmingly limp. "Call an ambulance," Daniel shouted, already checking for responsiveness. The boy's eyes rolled weakly toward him, unfocused. His breathing was rapid, uneven. Rex paced in tight circles, whining, scratching at the boy's backpack, then at Daniel's arm, again and again, as if trying to drag his attention somewhere specific. Daniel ignored it at first. He pressed two fingers to the boy's neck. The pulse was there but faint. Too faint. "Stay with me," Daniel urged. "You hear me? Stay awake." The boy's lips were turning blue. A cold wave of dread crashed through Daniel's chest. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't misbehavior. This was a medical emergency. And Rex had known before he did. Sirens wailed in the distance, now growing louder. The crowd buzzed with fear and confusion. Someone cried, someone prayed. Rex let out another desperate bark and shoved his nose hard into the backpack again, clawing at the zipper. Daniel finally looked down. And in that moment, kneeling on sun-warmed pavement, a dying child in his arms, a K9 begging him to understand, Daniel realized something with horrifying clarity. Rex had been warning him from the very beginning. But the truth about what Rex sensed, and how much time had already been lost, had yet to reveal itself. The street fair had descended into chaos. The music from the band on the flatbed truck was now drowned by the shrill cries of children and the panicked chatter of parents. Hot dogs sizzled on nearby grills, and the scent of fried dough was suddenly sour in the summer air. The crowd formed a shaky perimeter around Officer Daniel Reyes, Rex, and the little boy lying on the asphalt. Daniel's mind raced. He had handled dozens of emergencies before, but nothing had prepared him for this. The helplessness, the raw tension, the way Rex's eyes bore into his, demanding he see what he hadn't yet realized. The German shepherd's tail didn't wag. His ears didn't flick. Every muscle in his body screamed urgency, and he pressed his muzzle closer to the boy's chest, nudging gently as if saying, "Figure it out now." The boy lay still, his face pale, lips tinged with an unnatural blue. He made no sound, not a whimper, not a cry. It was unsettling, unnatural, and every second the silence stretched, Daniel felt time slip further from him. "Stay with me, buddy. Look at me," Daniel pleaded, voice trembling. "Come on, don't do this on me." Rex barked again, short and frantic this time, pawing Daniel's leg. The dog's behavior was unrelenting, insistent, as if he was trying to direct Daniel's attention somewhere specific. But the officer was too focused on the boy's fatting consciousness to notice the subtle cues Rex had been sending since they first arrived. "Call 911, Daniel barked to a man standing nearby, whose phone was already in his hand. The man fumbled, fingers shaking, barely managing to hit the call button. Rex nudged the boy's backpack again, scratching at the zipper with persistent urgency. Daniel glanced at it. The backpack was small, blue, covered in cartoon characters. There was nothing obviously alarming about it, but Rex's behavior told him there was something, and his gut tightened. The boy's chest heaved shallowly, each breath a desperate effort. Daniel tried to detect a pulse again, fingers trembling on the fragile skin of the boy's wrist. It was weak, barely detectable. Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity, and Daniel could hear the crowd murmuring behind him, voices rising with fear and judgment. One woman pushed forward, shouting, "Why isn't he crying? He's just a child." Her tone was accusatory, frightened. The implication stung, but Daniel couldn't answer. There were no easy answers here. Rex whined, low and mournful. His paws scraped the asphalt. Daniel finally allowed himself to look more closely at the backpack. Something glinted inside through the slightly open zipper, a small white case. Daniel's heart skipped. He fumbled to open it, revealing a neatly organized medical kit, vials, syringes, and a folded piece of paper marked with a bold red cross. Daniel's hands shook as he unfolded the note. "My son has severe type 1 diabetes. If he seems confused, collapses, or is unresponsive, his blood sugar is dangerously low. Please help him immediately." The words blurred before his eyes. The boy wasn't in danger because of some random accident. He was in danger because his body was starving for sugar, a life-and-death scenario Daniel had only ever seen in textbooks, never in person. Rex barked again, short, sharp, insistent. The dog's gaze shifted between Daniel and the boy, clearly frustrated that the officer had finally realized what he had been trying to communicate. The realization hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. Rex had known what was wrong before he did, before the boy collapsed, before any of this chaos. The dog had been pleading, and Daniel had been too slow to understand. The boy twitched slightly. Daniel reached for the medical kit, hands shaking. He could almost hear the clock ticking in his head, counting down the seconds left to act. "Hang in there, buddy. Just hang in there," Daniel murmured, voice breaking. He located the glucose gel inside the kit and applied it quickly to the boy's gums. The action had to be fast, precise. Every second counted. Rex sat back slightly but didn't relax. His eyes never left the boy. The whines subsided, replaced with soft, low growls of frustration, almost like he was saying, "We don't have time for mistakes." The boy stirred slightly and a faint moan escaped his lips. Daniel's heart leapt, hope sparking in the chaos. He administered another small dose of the glucose, his fingers trembling. Then came the longest, most agonizing wait. Minutes passed, or maybe it was seconds. Daniel had lost track of time. The boy's chest rose, then fell. His eyes blinked, half open, unfocused. Daniel exhaled shakily. He could see life returning, but it was fragile, tentative, like glass threatening to shatter with any sudden move. The crowd, sensing the shift, let out murmurs of relief, but Daniel barely noticed. He focused on the boy, on the faint pulse growing stronger, on the life he was slowly clawing back. Rex nudged the boy gently again, then barked softly, tail stiff. Daniel realized the dog's vigilance hadn't stopped. The danger wasn't over. Sirens wailed closer, the paramedics finally arriving. They pushed through the crowd and Daniel stepped aside, feeling an odd mix of relief and dread. The professionals would take over, but he knew in his gut that every moment before their arrival had mattered. The delay could cost more than time. It could cost the boy his life. As the paramedics checked vitals, Daniel knelt next to Rex. The dog's ears twitched at every command, every movement. He had known, and Daniel had been too slow. One paramedic glanced at the boy, then back at Daniel, eyes narrowing. "Do you know what triggered this?" she asked. Daniel shook his head, voice low. I think it was Rex. He knew before I did." The paramedic frowned but nodded. already focused on stabilizing the boy. Daniel looked down at Rex. The dog's eyes, so expressive, seemed almost human in their intensity. They carried blame, urgency, and relief all at once. Daniel patted him gently, voice barely a whisper. "Good boy, Rex, you saved him." But deep down, Daniel knew the words rang hollow. The boy had survived, yes, but survival wasn't enough. The minutes lost, the delay in understanding, had consequences he couldn't ignore. And as the ambulance doors closed, the boy's small hand clutching at Daniel's sleeve before being lifted inside, Rex barked once more, a sharp, commanding sound that drew the attention of the entire crowd. It was as if he were warning them. The danger wasn't just about this boy. It was about noticing signs, about listening, about paying attention before it's too late. Daniel's chest tightened. He knelt beside Rex, staring at the retreating ambulance. The dog sat rigid, still scanning the boy, still communicating in a language Daniel was only beginning to understand. Then in that charged silence, Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. There was something more he hadn't seen, something Rex had been trying to show him long before the collapse. And whatever it wasn't over. The crowd had dispersed slightly, leaving a thin ring of people watching, murmuring. But Daniel's eyes never left the ambulance. Rex whined softly, pawing at the pavement, nudging Daniel again. The officer's heart sank. He finally understood that the boy's collapse was just the beginning of a story far darker than anyone had anticipated. And Rex knew it. Daniel shivered, glancing around. The fair carried on in oblivious cheer, music and laughter returning to the air as though nothing had happened. But for him, for Rex, for the little boy now inside the ambulance, the world had changed in the span of a few desperate, terrifying minutes. Daniel knelt there, gripping Rex's leash, the dog's body rigid against his. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on him like a vice. He could still hear the faint heartbeat of the child in his mind, rapid and irregular, a reminder of how fragile life could be, and how easily it could slip away if one failed to pay attention to the signs. Rex barked again, low and urgent. Daniel looked down at him, confusion and fear mixing. The dog's eyes were fixed on the ambulance now, not the crowd. He was telling Daniel there was more, something hidden, something urgent. Daniel's stomach twisted. What had he missed? And in that instant, the world felt heavy, thick with suspense, as if the next revelation could shatter everything. He didn't yet know it, but Rex had been trying to communicate a truth so crucial, so devastating, that when it finally came to light, it might already be too late. The ambulance sirens receded down Main Street, fading into the distance like a heartbeat slipping away. Officer Daniel Reyes remained kneeling on the asphalt, gripping Rex's leash tightly, the dog still trembling with a low, urgent whine. The crowd had dispersed further now, leaving a scattering of onlookers who whispered to one another, their faces pale with unease. Yet Daniel could barely process them. His mind was spinning in a storm of guilt, relief, and dread. He had made a critical error. He knew it. Every second he had hesitated, every moment he had dismissed Rex's frantic signals, could have cost the boy his life. And now, even as the child was rushed to the hospital, Daniel felt a creeping sense that the danger hadn't fully passed. Rex pawed at him again, nuzzling Daniel's hand, and barked, a short, insistent sound that carried both warning and frustration. Daniel stared at the dog, feeling the weight of the K9's intelligence, the raw, instinctive understanding that humans often missed. He had assumed this was a standard medical emergency, a faint, a heat stroke, maybe a minor collapse. That was his first mistake. But the second, far more dangerous mistake was thinking he could handle it alone, without truly understanding what Rex had been trying to tell him. Daniel forced himself to stand, brushing asphalt dust from his uniform. His eyes scanned the fair. It was business as usual in some areas, children laughing, vendors shouting prices, music still blaring. To the oblivious crowd, nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But Daniel's vision was narrowed, focused only on the little boy, the ambulance, and the unrelenting intensity of Rex's gaze. "Rex, heel," Daniel said, trying to assert control, though his voice carried none of the usual authority. The dog reluctantly obeyed, but his body remained rigid, ears high, eyes darting back toward the ambulance's tail lights. Daniel knew he needed answers, but he also knew they might come too late. His mind replayed the moments leading up to the collapse. He remembered the boy standing alone near the balloon stand, pale and silent, clutching his red balloon as though it were a lifeline. He remembered Rex's frantic barking, the insistence in the dog's movements. He had assumed Rex was detecting something criminal, something dangerous in the immediate environment, rather than recognizing the subtle cues of a child in medical peril. It was a misjudgment that gnawed at him with each heartbeat. Daniel walked Rex toward a quieter section of the fair, away from the scattered crowd. Vendors were beginning to pack up early, sensing the tension, but no one had approached him. He knelt again beside Rex, stroking the dog's neck, feeling the heat of his fur under the sun. "You tried to tell me, didn't you, buddy?" Daniel whispered. "You knew before I did." Rex leaned into his touch but didn't relax. His ears flicked toward the street, toward the fatting sound of the ambulance. He barked again, short, urgent, precise. Daniel realized that the dog's insistence wasn't just about the boy's collapse. There was something else, something he had yet to understand. Daniel felt a cold dread settle over him. He glanced at the backpack, now lying abandoned on the asphalt. The medical kit and the note had been left behind in the flurry of the paramedics' arrival. He knew it wasn't enough to simply rely on memory. He had to understand fully what had happened, why Rex had reacted the way he did, and what signals he had missed in those crucial seconds. As he examined the abandoned bag, a thought struck him, a terrifying possibility. What if the boy's condition had been worsening long before the collapse? What if Rex had detected it, tried to warn him, and he had ignored it? The weight of those missed signals pressed heavily on Daniel, making his stomach churn. Every second of hesitation, every assumption he had made, could have compounded the danger. The sound of sirens returned briefly, closer this time. Another emergency vehicle. Daniel's heart raced. He felt a pang of helplessness that gnawed at him from the inside. He had trained for emergencies, for situations that demanded split-second decisions. But he had never trained for the guilt of realizing that instinct, Rex's instinct, had been correct from the start, and he had doubted it. He looked down at Rex, who barked once more, pawing at the bag. Daniel knelt to open it again, as if the contents might offer him guidance he had missed. The medical kit was intact, the note folded carefully beside it. But now he saw something he hadn't noticed before, a small digital glucose monitor nestled among the supplies, the screen blinking faintly. It was a warning device, a silent alarm that the boy had likely set up to alert guardians of dangerously low blood sugar. Daniel's stomach dropped. The boy's life had been in real peril far longer than he had imagined, and Rex had known. The dog had been signaling a life-threatening emergency, not a routine faint, not a scare, not a misbehaving child, but a medical crisis that demanded immediate attention. Rex barked again, more sharply this time, breaking Daniel's reverie. He looked up to see a woman pushing through the lingering crowd, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. She shouted the boy's name, her voice trembling. Daniel instinctively recognized her, not as a stranger but as the boy's mother. She was terrified, panicked, searching desperately for her child. The crowd parted for her and she ran to the ambulance, but Daniel noticed the strain in her face. She was frantic, but she also carried a look of profound realization that something had gone terribly wrong. Daniel clenched his fists. He had made a choice to delay understanding, to misinterpret Rex's signals, and the consequences were unfolding before him. The boy was alive, but only barely, and every second that had been wasted in hesitation could have been the difference between life and death. The mother collapsed onto the curb beside the ambulance, tears streaming down her face. She held her hands over her mouth, trying to stifle a sob, her gaze fixed on the paramedics working inside. Daniel felt a pang of guilt so sharp it took his breath away. He had been trained to protect and serve, but in those crucial seconds he had failed. Rex nudged Daniel's hand again, insistent, demanding attention. Daniel realized the dog was still trying to communicate something he hadn't yet grasped. The urgency hadn't ended with the ambulance's departure. Rex's bark, sharp and insistent, was a warning he needed to heed immediately. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the scene. The fair was returning to normal, oblivious to the near tragedy that had unfolded in its midst. Children laughed, vendors shouted prices, and the band resumed its music, trying to recapture the festive atmosphere. But for Daniel, the world felt hollow, fractured, filled with unspoken consequences. He knelt beside Rex, gripping the leash tightly. The dog's eyes were fixed on the ambulance's tail lights, unwavering, unrelenting. Daniel realized that whatever signals Rex had been trying to convey, there was more to the story than a single medical emergency. He swallowed hard, feeling the first real pangs of fear. He had assumed he understood the situation, assumed he had handled it as best as he could. But now, faced with Rex's unyielding insistence, he knew that the first mistake, underestimating the dog's instincts, was only the beginning. Daniel rose slowly, brushing asphalt dust from his uniform, and glanced back toward the street. The crowd was dispersing, the fair returning to its normal rhythm. But the memory of the boy's pale face, the blue tint of his lips, and Rex's desperate warnings were etched into his mind like burned letters. He took a deep breath and made a decision. He needed to follow Rex, to understand fully what the dog had been trying to tell him, before it was too late. As they moved through the thinning crowd, Rex's pace quickened, his tail stiff, his ears high. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He knew instinctively that the dog was leading him somewhere important, somewhere dangerous, somewhere that demanded his full attention. And for the first time in his career, Daniel Reyes realized that the true test of his skill, his judgment, and his courage had only just begun. Whatever awaited them next, Daniel understood one thing with painful clarity. The first mistake had already been made, and the consequences were only just beginning to unfold. The ambulance had vanished around the corner, leaving behind a strange silence broken only by the murmurs of lingering fairgoers and the occasional bark from Rex. Officer Daniel Reyes remained kneeling on the asphalt, his chest heavy with guilt, sweat running down his temple despite the cooling summer breeze. He could feel the dog's tension radiating like heat from a forge, muscles taut, ears erect, tail stiff. Rex wasn't just reacting. He was communicating something Daniel had yet to understand. Daniel glanced at the backpack lying on the pavement, the red balloon now sagging against a nearby lamppost. His eyes fell again on the small medical kit inside, gloves, vials, syringes, and the folded note he had barely absorbed earlier. But the note alone did not tell the full story. He fumbled with the digital glucose monitor tucked neatly beside the vials, its tiny screen blinking with an urgent, silent alarm. Rex barked again, short, sharp, insistent, and pawed at the backpack. The dog's gaze never wavered from Daniel, as though he were demanding not just attention but comprehension. Daniel swallowed hard. "Okay, buddy," he muttered, kneeling to examine the kit once more. "Show me, what am I missing?" He began rifling through the contents carefully. The note read, "My son has severe type 1 diabetes. If he seems confused or collapses, his blood sugar is dangerously low. Please help immediately." Daniel had skimmed it before, but now he read every word, every line. He could almost feel the boy's desperation embedded in the neat, urgent handwriting. His stomach twisted as he realized how critical the timing was. Low blood sugar doesn't wait. Each minute without intervention increases the risk of seizures, organ damage, or worse. And that's when he saw it, a small, folded sheet of paper tucked under the insulin kit. It was a medical log, filled with timestamps, glucose readings, and notes on previous hypoglycemic episodes. The last entry, written that morning, indicated a dangerously low blood sugar spike just an hour before the fair. Daniel's breath hitched. Rex had known this. The dog had smelled the boy's chemical imbalance, his body's distress signals, before anyone else did. Before the boy collapsed, before Daniel even recognized the signs, Rex had been sounding the alarm. Rex barked again, pawing at Daniel's leg, almost anxious, as though frustrated that the officer had finally realized what had been right in front of him all along. Daniel felt a knot tighten in his chest. How had he missed it? How had he mistaken the dog's instincts for mere overreaction? The fair faded into the background. Children's laughter, vendors calling out their specials, the distant music, all of it became static noise compared to the urgency of the moment. Daniel's mind raced through every detail. The boy's pale skin, the shallow, uneven breaths, the stiffness in his fingers, the unresponsiveness. And Rex's frantic, insistent barking, circling, pawing. All of it had been a language Daniel had failed to read in time. He knelt closer to Rex, pressing a hand to the dog's neck. "You tried to tell me, didn't you?" he whispered. Rex leaned in, ears flicking, tail stiff. The dog's eyes were impossibly clear, full of intelligence, frustration, and a kind of quiet reproach. Daniel felt a wave of guilt wash over him so strong it made his knees buckle. Suddenly the whine turned into a low, persistent growl. Daniel's head shot up, scanning the street. At first there was nothing, just the dispersing crowd and the hum of the fair. Then he noticed a small crowd gathering near the edge of the pavement, whispering frantically among themselves. One woman clutched her purse, pointing toward a small alley behind the food trucks. Daniel's gut twisted. He moved closer, Rex at his side, sensing the shift in energy. Something about the way the people were staring, eyes wide, lips parted, made his heart pound faster. He caught snippets of conversation. "Did you see him?" "The boy, he's gone." "No, they took him to the ambulance." Daniel's pulse raced. The paramedics had been efficient, but this wasn't over. He could feel it in Rex's every movement, every bark. The dog nudged Daniel's leg again, insistent, and then suddenly turned and bolted toward the alley, dragging the leash taut. "Rex, wait!" Daniel shouted, but the dog didn't stop. He tore through the thinning crowd, determined, unwavering. Daniel chased after him, weaving past startled fairgoers, heart hammering in his chest. At the mouth of the alley, Rex skidded to a halt. His ears flicked toward a small dumpster tucked behind a brick wall. Daniel followed the dog's gaze and froze. There, lying crumpled and trembling, was the boy's backpack, partially unzipped, and inside it, something Daniel hadn't noticed in the chaos. A small vial of insulin knocked to the ground, the cap loose, some of the liquid spilled. Daniel's stomach sank. He hadn't seen it before, hadn't realized the danger had been twofold: the boy's critical low blood sugar and the potential mishap with his medication. Rex had known, from the moment he first barked at the boy, that time was slipping away. Rex barked again, this time sharper, more commanding. He pressed his nose against Daniel's leg, eyes locked on him with unyielding intensity, as though saying, "This is the part you missed. This is the part you must understand." Daniel knelt beside the backpack, carefully securing the insulin vial. He felt a cold shiver run through him. Every second he had hesitated before, every assumption, every misread cue, had almost led to disaster. Rex had been trying to guide him, alert him, save the boy in the most primal, intelligent way a dog could. Then it hit Daniel, the enormity of the moment. The boy's collapse had been just the beginning. He had survived the immediate crisis, yes, but he had been on the razor's edge of irreversible damage. The risk wasn't just low blood sugar, it was the seconds lost before intervention. Those seconds could mean seizures, permanent brain damage, or death. Daniel's hands shook as he collected the supplies, tucking the insulin safely back into the bag. He looked down at Rex, whose ears were still perked, body taut with tension. The dog's growl had softened slightly, but the urgency in his eyes remained. Daniel knew he had learned something vital that day, something beyond procedure, beyond training, beyond protocol. Rex had communicated in a way humans often couldn't read, and it was a language of survival, instinct, and intelligence. And it was a language that demanded respect, attention, and immediate action. As the sound of the ambulance faded entirely, Daniel felt a pang of helplessness and relief intertwined. The boy was alive, but barely. The world around them had returned to normal, children playing, music blaring, vendors shouting. But Daniel knew that for the boy, and for him, nothing would ever be the same. Rex barked one last time, soft but insistent, as if to punctuate the lesson. You must always listen. You must always pay attention. Life can hang by the briefest thread. Daniel nodded, swallowing hard. I understand, Rex, he whispered. I get it now, I won't forget. But deep inside, a gnawing unease remained. The boy had survived this time, but the near miss revealed a terrifying truth. Instincts like Rex's weren't just warnings. They were life-saving guidance that humans often ignored until it was too late. Daniel helped Rex to his feet, leash tight in his hand. He surveyed the fairgrounds once more, heart heavy. Somewhere in that chaotic, vibrant town, a child had nearly been lost. And while Rex had known all along, Daniel had realized only too late just how fragile life could be, and how quickly the scales could tip toward tragedy. The dog nudged his hand again, soft this time, almost tender. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. Rex had communicated everything he could, but now it was Daniel's responsibility to act on it, to learn from it, to honor it. And as the shadows lengthened over Maplewood that afternoon, Daniel understood something he could never unlearn. Rex had saved the boy once, but if he didn't truly listen next time, the consequences could be fatal. A distant siren echoed again, drawing Daniel's gaze toward the horizon. His chest tightened. Something about the sound, combined with Rex's unwavering focus, told him that the story wasn't over. The boy's life hung in the balance, and Daniel feared that the next revelation could arrive too late to prevent a tragedy that was already in motion. The weight of that realization pressed down on him as he led Rex away from the alley, the fair returning to its oblivious rhythm around them. Daniel's thoughts were dark, tangled, and heavy with guilt, and yet beneath it all burned a determination. He would not fail Rex's warnings again. He would not ignore the signals, no matter how subtle, no matter how confusing. The boy had survived the first emergency, but the second, far more insidious truth was waiting. And Daniel, with Rex at his side, would have to face it, no matter how devastating. The ambulance had disappeared around the corner, but for Officer Daniel Reyes, the sound of the siren still echoed in his ears, a haunting reminder of how close the boy had come to death. Rex remained by his side, body tense, muscles coiled, ears pricked, tail stiff, a living warning that the crisis was not over. Daniel had learned the truth. The boy's collapse had been just the beginning, but he had no idea just how deep the danger ran. Daniel watched the paramedics' vehicle fade into the distance, its lights reflecting off the asphalt like blood on glass. The crowd had thinned to scattered spectators, murmuring to one another, whispering about the collapsed child and the brave K-9 who had tried to save him. Some clutched phones in hand, recording the scene, while others shook their heads, confused or relieved. But Daniel didn't notice them. He couldn't. His eyes were fixed on Rex, on the little boy, and on the sharp, bitter taste of guilt that lodged in his chest. He remembered the moment the boy had collapsed, pale, silent, blue lips trembling, limbs limp. The child had been on the knife's edge, and Daniel had been too slow. The memory tightened around his chest, constricting him like a vice. And yet Rex had known. The dog had been pleading, shouting with his body, with his bark, with his instinct, trying to communicate a life-threatening emergency that Daniel had failed to recognize. The sound of a second siren drew Daniel's gaze back to the street. Another emergency vehicle, another incident. His stomach tightened as he saw it. A second ambulance, closer now, weaving carefully through traffic. This one wasn't carrying the boy. It was coming toward him, toward Rex, toward the heart of the fair. Daniel's pulse quickened. Something was happening, and his instincts screamed that it was connected. Rex growled low, a warning Daniel had learned to respect after years of partnership. The dog's eyes flicked toward the alley where the boy's backpack still lay. Daniel felt a cold chill as he realized the truth. The boy's life had been precarious before, and now something else had gone wrong. He sprinted toward the alley, Rex close at his side, weaving through the scattering crowd. Adrenaline surged, sharpening his senses. Every second felt elongated, every heartbeat a drum of urgency. Daniel's eyes scanned the alley for any sign of trouble. And then he saw her, the boy's mother. She was running toward the ambulance, face pale, eyes wide with panic. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she shouted the boy's name. Daniel's chest tightened. She collapsed onto the curb beside the vehicle, shaking uncontrollably, hands pressed to her mouth as if to stifle a scream. The paramedics were working inside, checking vitals, administering oxygen, preparing to stabilize the boy for transport. Daniel knelt beside his K9, watching helplessly as the professionals worked with precise efficiency. But helplessness gnawed at him. He had been there first. He could have acted sooner. Every second he had hesitated could have been fatal. Rex pawed at Daniel's arm, insistent. Daniel followed the dog's gaze and froze. The paramedic had pulled out a syringe from the medical kit, carefully preparing an insulin dose. But something was wrong. The boy's blood sugar had dropped again, faster, more dangerously than anticipated. His pulse was erratic. His skin was clammy, his lips a deepening shade of blue. Daniel's stomach dropped. Rex had known. The dog had sensed the imbalance, the critical low blood sugar that had already begun to spiral out of control before the first collapse, and Daniel had been too slow. "Stay with me, buddy. Look at me," Daniel shouted, kneeling beside the boy as the paramedics worked. His hands hovered over the child, ready to assist, though he knew they had the expertise he lacked. Rex barked sharply, nudging Daniel's leg as if trying to communicate. "He's slipping again. You have to act now." Daniel glanced at the mother, her face twisted with panic, and felt his throat tighten. The boy's small body twitched under the paramedics' hands, fighting for every breath. Daniel's chest ached as he realized how fragile life was, and how easily it could slip away. The monitor beeped erratically, the red lights flashing warning signals. Daniel's hands shook. The boy's tiny chest rose and fell in uneven, desperate gasps. Each second felt like a lifetime, each heartbeat a ticking bomb. Rex pressed closer, nose to Daniel's hand, almost pleading, urging him to focus, to understand fully the severity of the moment. The paramedics worked furiously, one adjusting the oxygen mask, the other administering glucose through an IV line. Daniel watched as the boy's hands twitched, his fingers curling weakly around the fabric of his shirt. The mother wept openly now, her sobs racking her body. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. He had trained for emergencies. He had faced danger, violence, and chaos, but nothing had prepared him for the helplessness of watching a child fight for his life, knowing he could have acted sooner, knowing that every second counted. Rex barked again, short and commanding. Daniel realized that the dog's insistence wasn't just instinct, it was experience, intelligence, and warning, all combined into one living, breathing force. Rex had known from the first moment the boy was in danger. He had been communicating, signaling, pleading for intervention, and Daniel had hesitated. The boy's eyelids fluttered, lips tinged purple as the glucose began to take effect. The monitor beeped more steadily, though faintly. The paramedics exchanged quick, urgent words, adjusting dosage, checking vitals, stabilizing oxygen flow. Daniel knelt beside them, heart hammering, feeling both relief and terror. The crisis was far from over. Rex pressed his body closer to the boy, resting his head near the small chest, eyes still sharp and alert. Daniel felt a surge of awe and fear. The dog's awareness, intelligence, and dedication had been the boy's first lifeline. Without him, the outcome might have been tragic. Minutes stretched on like hours. The boy's chest rose, then fell, then rose again with a trembling rhythm. The paramedics' hands moved quickly, efficiently, but Daniel knew that every action, every decision, had been too late by seconds that could not be reclaimed. Finally, the monitor stabilized. The boy's lips pinked slightly, his fingers twitched, and his chest rose more evenly. The immediate danger had passed, but the cost of delay weighed heavily on everyone present. The mother collapsed against the paramedic, sobbing uncontrollably, cradling her son's hand. Daniel knelt beside Rex, stroking the dog's neck, voice barely audible. "Good boy, Rex. You saved him." Rex's ears flicked, eyes unwavering, still scanning the surroundings as if the danger hadn't ended. Daniel's chest tightened. The boy had survived, but only barely, and he knew deep down that the story wasn't over. As the ambulance doors closed, Daniel's mind raced. He replayed every moment, the boy standing alone, pale and silent, the red balloon slipping from his hand, Rex's frantic barking, the collapse, the lost seconds. He had learned in the most terrifying way possible that instinct, intelligence, and observation could mean the difference between life and death. Rex nudged Daniel's hand again, soft but insistent. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. The dog had warned him. He had communicated in ways Daniel could barely comprehend. And yet, despite the lessons learned, the officer knew that one mistake had already been made, and that the consequences would linger. The mother clutched her child inside the ambulance, tears streaming down her face. Daniel stayed by the curb, watching, feeling the weight of responsibility press down on him like never before. He had trained for emergencies, but this had been different. This had been personal, and the guilt was suffocating. Rex barked softly, tail stiff, as if reminding Daniel that vigilance must never waver. The boy's life had been saved, but the seconds lost had been costly, and Daniel knew, with chilling certainty, that the next lesson, the next test of instinct and attention, might arrive when there was no second chance. The fair resumed its chaotic cheer, oblivious to the near tragedy that had unfolded in its midst. But for Daniel and Rex, nothing would ever be the same. The boy had survived, yes, but the shadow of what could have happened loomed over them, a stark reminder of how quickly life could tilt toward disaster. Daniel knelt beside Rex, gripping the leash tightly, the weight of guilt and determination pressing down on him. "We'll do better next time," he whispered. Rex's ears twitched. The dog's gaze never left the ambulance, never left the boy, and Daniel knew that the work of saving lives was far from over. The moment had changed everything. And Daniel Reyes understood with painful clarity that sometimes instinct speaks louder than training, and that listening could mean the difference between life and death. The street fair had long since ended, leaving only echoes of laughter and music in the sticky summer air. Maplewood, Ohio, returned to its ordinary rhythm, unaware of the near tragedy that had unfolded just hours before. But for Officer Daniel Reyes, the day was far from over. The sights, sounds, and most hauntingly the memory of that blue-tinged face, refused to leave him. He walked slowly through the dimly lit streets, Rex at his side, the dog's paws making soft thuds on the pavement. The officer's uniform was stained with dust and sweat, the leash heavy in his hand. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Every thought looped back to that moment when the boy collapsed, when Rex barked with urgent insistence, when seconds slipped by before the truth became obvious. It wasn't just guilt. It was a deep, gnawing shame. Daniel had trained for emergencies. He had faced armed suspects, high-speed chases, and domestic violence calls that left blood on his hands. But none of it compared to the helplessness he felt watching a child fight for life, knowing he had been too slow. Rex nudged his hand, whining softly. Daniel knelt, burying his face in the dog's fur. "I should have listened sooner, Rex. I should have listened." His voice cracked. The words felt like a confession, a plea, a prayer. The dog leaned into him, ears flicking, eyes searching, as if trying to say, "It's not too late to learn." That evening, Daniel returned to the station. The fluorescent lights flickered above him as he sat at his desk, staring at the file on the boy's medical condition. Every detail he read intensified the crushing weight of guilt. The boy had type 1 diabetes, a severe, unpredictable form. Even minor miscalculations could spiral into disaster. Rex had sensed it. He had known the danger before anyone else did. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. The city had called it a K9 incident, but that phrasing was inadequate. Rex had warned him. He had acted to save a life. And Daniel had hesitated. Seconds that felt like forever had passed, and he knew in his gut that those seconds could have been fatal. Hours later, Daniel's phone rang. It was the hospital. "Officer Reyes." The voice was calm, professional, but there was an undercurrent of gravity. "This is Nurse Thompson. Your young patient is awake. He's stable, but—" She trailed off. Daniel's stomach dropped. But what? "There's been some concern regarding his oxygen levels during the incident. He's recovering, yes, but the events put him at risk for complications. We'll continue monitoring him closely." Daniel exhaled shakily, relief and fear colliding violently in his chest. The boy had survived. He had survived. But the fragility of that survival haunted Daniel. He had trained for high-stress situations, but nothing could prepare a human for witnessing how delicate a child's life could be, and knowing that one misstep, one hesitation, could have ended it. The next day, the story hit the local news. Headlines screamed, "K9 officer saves child at street fair. Miracle or misunderstanding?" Social media lit up instantly. Videos from bystanders showed Rex barking, circling, pawing at the boy. The footage was edited, cut, looped, replayed. Comments ranged from praise to condemnation. "Brave dog, that dog is a hero. Why did the officer wait so long? The child could have died. Someone explain why a dog knew more than a trained human." Daniel didn't read the comments. He couldn't. Every notification chime felt like a dagger. Public perception didn't matter. The boy's life and the seconds lost mattered. Rex sat beside him in his apartment that evening, head resting on Daniel's knee, eyes steady and unwavering. Daniel poured himself a cup of coffee, only to stare at it blankly. He was haunted by the scene: blue lips, shallow breaths, the red balloon floating uselessly above the crowd, the boy collapsing into the asphalt. And Rex barking and pawing, desperate to save a life that Daniel had almost allowed to slip away. Sleep did not come that night. Daniel replayed every moment in agonizing detail. The boy standing alone, the crowd oblivious, Rex barking and circling, the collapse, the delay, the ambulance arriving. His chest tightened with every memory, a physical ache that refused to subside. He thought about the mother, how she had screamed, cried, and nearly fainted when she saw her child on the stretcher. He thought about the paramedics, working with efficiency and calm, and he felt the weight of his own hesitations pressing down. The boy had survived, yes, but only barely, and only because of Rex. Days passed. Daniel returned to work, but his routine felt hollow. Every call, every response, every interaction was filtered through the lens of that one afternoon. He found himself watching children closely now, scanning for subtle signs of distress, listening to instincts he had once questioned. He noticed the way Rex would pause, sniff the air, focus on a single individual. Daniel had learned to trust the dog implicitly, but the memory of the boy's collapse lingered, a constant, gnawing reminder that even a hero dog couldn't save someone if humans failed to act. Rex, for his part, seemed unshaken outwardly. He performed drills, obeyed commands, and moved with the precision of a trained K9. Yet Daniel noticed subtle changes, how the dog would glance at him, eyes sharp, alert, as though silently admonishing him, "Never doubt the signs again." One evening, Daniel returned to the scene of the incident, the fairgrounds now empty and quiet. The asphalt still held the faint warmth of summer, and the balloon vendor had packed up, leaving only a single deflated red balloon tethered to a post. Daniel knelt, tracing the outline of where the boy had collapsed. He could almost see the scene replaying before him, Blue lips, shallow breaths, Rex barking desperately, the ambulance racing away. He pressed a hand to the pavement. "I failed him," he whispered. "I let precious seconds slip away. I should have listened sooner." Rex sat beside him, head tilted, ears flicking. The dog's gaze was calm but intense, a silent reassurance and warning combined. Daniel realized that Rex's intelligence, his instincts, and his courage had saved a life. And yet the lesson was clear. Instinct could only guide so far. Human judgment had to act. The guilt was a heavy cloak, pressing down on him day and night. He replayed the incident over and over, analyzing every second, every decision, every hesitation. He could see where he had failed, where he had assumed, where he had doubted. And in each iteration, he felt the weight of potential consequences. What might have happened if Rex had been ignored entirely, if the ambulance had been delayed further, if the boy had slipped beyond saving? The story reached national attention within a week. Articles and interviews praised Rex, the hero dog, but also questioned Daniel's response. Some blamed him publicly, others defended him. Daniel stayed silent. He didn't seek accolades, nor did he defend his actions. The only thing that mattered was understanding the depth of the warning he had ignored and the gravity of what could have been lost. Late one night, Daniel received a call from the hospital. The boy had woken up fully, alert but weak. The mother wanted to thank him personally. Daniel's chest tightened. He agreed to visit, though the thought filled him with apprehension and dread. Could he face them? Could he face the reality of what almost happened? Rex sat beside him as he drove, silent but vigilant, as if understanding that the journey was more than physical. It was emotional, moral, and irreversible. When Daniel finally entered the hospital room, he saw the mother first. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying, but there was a glimmer of relief. The boy lay in the bed, pale but stable, his small hand clutched in his mother. Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I know Rex tried to warn you," the mother said softly, her voice trembling. "He knew before anyone else did." Daniel swallowed hard. Yes, I know," he admitted. "I should have listened sooner. I failed him almost." She nodded, squeezing her son's hand. "So did the world, but he's alive. That's what matters." Daniel looked down at Rex, whose eyes never left the boy. The dog had communicated what humans often could not: urgency, danger, life-or-death signals. And yet, the responsibility now fell fully on Daniel's shoulders. He had to learn to adapt, to act without hesitation next time. As he left the hospital, the weight of guilt pressed heavily on him, but beneath it burned a resolve. He would not fail again. He would honor Rex's instincts, trust his judgment, and never ignore the signs. But deep in his mind, Daniel knew the truth. Some consequences couldn't be undone. Some mistakes lingered, echoing in memory, haunting every decision that followed. And while the boy had survived the shadow of that day, the seconds lost, the hesitation, the near-fatal delay, would follow Daniel and Rex for the rest of their lives. And somewhere in that haunting quiet, Daniel realized something chilling. The story was far from over. The days after the incident blurred together for Officer Daniel Reyes. Maplewood returned to its ordinary rhythm, but Daniel's world had shifted. The street fair was over, the red balloon deflated and tucked away in memory, yet its image haunted him relentlessly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the little boy's pale, trembling form on the asphalt, the shallow rise and fall of his chest, the blue tinge to his lips. He saw Rex barking desperately, pawing, urging him to act, and he felt with sharp clarity the weight of seconds lost. Rex remained at his side, alert, unrelenting. Even during downtime at the station, the dog's body hummed with tension, as if the memory of that day still lingered in his muscles and bones. Daniel would glance at him, seeing the intelligence and awareness in the K9's eyes, and feel a pang of humility. He had nearly ignored a warning he couldn't afford to dismiss. The boy's mother had called a few times, each conversation brief but heavy with gratitude and worry. She spoke about the child's recovery, his lingering weakness, the careful monitoring required to prevent another collapse. Daniel could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the sleepless nights spent watching a fragile body, and he felt guilt spiral through him like a storm. It wasn't just guilt, it was a realization of consequences. Every second had mattered. Every hesitation, every assumption he had made had compounded the danger. The boy had survived, yes, but the trauma, the physical and emotional strain, was ongoing. His glucose levels fluctuated unpredictably, leaving the child vulnerable to repeated emergencies. Daniel couldn't stop replaying that first collapse, imagining what might have happened if Rex hadn't acted, if the seconds had slipped even further. He sat in his apartment that night, Rex curled at his feet, the city lights flickering faintly through the blinds. The silence was oppressive. Daniel's mind traced every step. The boy standing alone, the balloon slipping from his hand, the collapse, the ambulance, the frantic efforts of the paramedics. Each moment was a knife twisting in his chest. The price of seconds lost weighed on him in a way that no training or experience could erase. The next day at the station, Daniel was summoned to a meeting with the chief. His heart thudded uneasily in his chest. He knew the department had to review the incident. It was procedure. But he feared the judgment would be harsher than protocol. "Rays," the chief said, eyes grave, "we've reviewed the video footage and the reports. There's no doubt Rex acted appropriately. You followed procedure, but there's concern about reaction time. You need to explain what happened." Daniel swallowed hard. He recounted the events, careful with facts but raw with emotion. He described the boy's collapse, the missed signs, Rex's insistence, and the urgency he had failed to recognize. The chief listened, expression unreadable, then nodded slowly. "You acted under pressure, Rays. Everyone misses things in moments like these, but Rex's instinct saved that boy. Never underestimate that again." Daniel nodded, but the words didn't ease the guilt. They were a reminder of how fragile life could be, how a single hesitation could have catastrophic consequences. The boy had survived, but the memory of what almost happened lingered like a shadow, stretching far beyond the day itself. Meanwhile, Rex had sensed it all along. Daniel watched the dog during drills and patrols, noticing subtle behaviors, the ears flicking at faint noises, the tail stiffening at distant movements, the gaze lingering on children, always assessing, always calculating risk. Rex carried the memory of that day in his body. Daniel realized it wasn't just instinct, it was awareness, intelligence, and memory intertwined. At home, Daniel's nights were restless. Every siren, every shout, every child's cry made him flinch. He imagined another child in peril, another collapse, and wondered if he would act in time. The weight of potential consequences pressed heavily on him. He had learned a lesson too late. The price of seconds lost could never be fully repaid. Then came the follow-up visit at the hospital. The boy's mother invited Daniel to see the child's recovery firsthand. He arrived with Rex, entering the room cautiously. The boy lay in a hospital bed, looking pale but alert. He clutched a small stuffed animal, eyes wary. "Hi there," Daniel said softly. "How are you feeling today?" The boy managed a small smile, hesitant but real. Daniel's heart ached. The innocence was still there, but the fragility, the lingering danger, was visible in every tiny gesture, every careful movement. The mother spoke quietly. "He's still recovering. His sugar levels can drop without warning. We have to be vigilant all the time." Daniel nodded, swallowing hard. He realized that survival was not a single moment. It was continuous vigilance. Rex had saved the boy once, but the risk was ongoing, and it demanded attention and care. He knelt beside the bed, Rex sitting calmly by his side. "You're safe now," Daniel said, voice steady but full of emotion. Rex kept watch. I should have listened sooner." The mother placed a hand on his arm. "You both saved him," she said softly, "and he's alive because of you." Daniel nodded, though the weight in his chest remained. He had saved a life, yes, But the cost of delay, the near misses, the seconds that could have tipped the balance would haunt him. He looked at Rex, realizing the dog had carried the warning through every step of the day, every second of the crisis. And if Daniel had doubted him, even for a moment, the consequences could have been irreversible. On the drive home, Daniel watched Maplewood passing by, quiet streets now illuminated by streetlights. Rex sat alert in the passenger seat, ears twitching at every sound. Daniel realized that life was unpredictable, fragile, and unforgiving, and that moments of hesitation, however small, could carry a price too high to ignore. He thought about the boy lying in that hospital bed, the mother watching over him, the paramedics' swift actions, and Rex's unwavering vigilance. Every second had mattered. Every decision had counted. Daniel knew he would never forget. The price of seconds lost was etched into his memory, shaping every patrol, every decision, every glance at a child in distress. And while the boy had survived, Daniel understood that the lessons learned were far from theoretical. They were real, urgent, and permanent. That night he sat alone in his apartment, Rex resting his head on Daniel's lap. The city outside was quiet, but inside, the memory of that day remained vivid. Daniel traced the moments in his mind, replaying them with precision, understanding now how finely life balanced on the edge of attention and instinct. Rex looked up, eyes intelligent and unwavering, as if silently reminding Daniel, never hesitate, never doubt, every second counts. Daniel swallowed, heart heavy. He knew he had learned the lesson, but at a cost he could never repay. The boy was alive, but the shadow of those lost seconds would follow them all forever. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel realized the chilling truth. The moment everything changed wasn't just the boy's collapse. It was the realization that life could slip away in seconds, and that missing a single cue could haunt you forever. The hospital corridor was quiet, almost oppressively so, as Officer Daniel Reyes walked beside Rex. The K-9's paws clicked softly against the polished tile, each step precise, controlled, yet charged with urgency. Daniel had visited the boy several times since the collapse, but today, something felt different. The air was heavy with anticipation, the kind that prickled at the back of his neck and sent his pulse racing. Rex's ears twitched, head raised, eyes locked on the door at the end of the hall. Daniel followed the dog's gaze and stopped short. The boy's mother was there, packing, hands clutched tightly together. The child himself lay on the hospital bed, pale, frail, but awake. His small body seemed to vibrate with tension, the faint rise and fall of his chest betraying the exhaustion he carried inside. Daniel swallowed hard. He had watched the boy survive the collapse, seen the flickers of life return, witnessed the stabilizing glucose and oxygen treatments. But as he stood there, he realized the truth he had been avoiding. The danger had never fully passed. The collapse had been only the first stage, a harbinger of a deeper, hidden risk that no one had yet recognized. The mother turned, eyes red-rimmed, voice trembling. "Daniel, there's something you need to see, something the doctors didn't catch at first." Daniel's stomach tightened. He stepped closer, heart hammering. "What is it?" he asked, though a part of him already feared the answer. She held up a small device, a handheld glucose monitor, its digital display blinking rapidly. "His sugar, it's dropping again," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Even after the treatments, even after everything, it's still unstable. The doctors say it's unpredictable. They didn't realize how severe his episodes were until now." Daniel felt a cold wave of dread wash over him. Rex growled low, tail stiff, body tense. The dog's gaze shifted from the monitor to the boy, unblinking, unwavering. Daniel understood instantly. The K-9 had sensed this too. The first collapse had been a warning, but the true danger had always been lurking, hidden beneath the surface. Rex barked sharply, short and insistent. Daniel knelt beside the bed, hand resting on the dog's head. "I know, Rex, I see it now," he whispered. The boy's mother bit her lip, tears brimming, as if aware of the gravity of what was unfolding. The monitor's beeps grew louder. more urgent, each one a dagger to Daniel's chest. The boy's tiny fingers twitched, his face pale beneath the hospital's fluorescent lights. Daniel's eyes darted between the readings and the child, and he felt the familiar gut-wrenching tension of being seconds too slow. Suddenly, the monitor alarmed, a shrill, piercing sound that made Daniel flinch. The boy's pulse had dropped dangerously low, his oxygen levels faltering. Daniel's heart raced. The paramedics were nowhere to be seen. The emergency response this time relied on him, on Rex, on split-second decisions. "Rex," Daniel said urgently, voice steady but intense, "we have to act now." The dog barked again, circling, pawing at the bed, nudging Daniel as if to reinforce the urgency. Daniel grabbed the emergency glucose gel from his belt, a precaution he had insisted on carrying after the last incident, and applied it to the boy's gums. Every movement was precise, every second stretching into an eternity. The boy stirred weakly, lips twitching, but his body remained limp. Daniel's chest tightened, sweat dripping from his temple. He could feel time slipping away, slipping through his fingers like sand. Then Rex nudged the boy's hand gently, eyes sharp and unwavering, and barked again. Daniel followed the dog's guidance instinctively, adjusting the child's positioning to optimize the absorption of the glucose. The monitor's beeps began to stabilize slightly, but Daniel knew it was temporary. The child's body was delicate, fragile, perched on a knife's edge. The danger wasn't over, it was persistent, insidious, and unpredictable. Minutes later, the paramedics arrived, rushing in with precise efficiency. Daniel stepped aside but remained vigilant, hands hovering near the boy in case immediate intervention was required. Rex stayed at his side, body tense, eyes locked on the child, refusing to relax. The lead paramedic adjusted the IV line, checking vitals, and glanced at Daniel. "He's unstable," she said, voice tight. "Even with the initial treatment, his sugar levels fluctuate dangerously. We'll have to monitor him continuously." Daniel nodded grimly. He had seen this coming, felt it in his gut and in Rex's insistent behavior. The first collapse had been only a warning. The true threat had never left. The mother held the boy's hand, trembling, whispering soothing words. Daniel watched, heart heavy. He realized the emotional toll on the family would last far longer than any physical recovery. One mistake, one hesitation, could have changed everything. Rex barked again, low and commanding, as if reminding Daniel that vigilance must never waver. Daniel's hand rested on the dog's head, gripping the leash tightly. He knew that Rex's instincts had saved the boy twice now, but the lesson was brutal and clear. Instinct alone wasn't enough. Humans had to act, and even seconds lost could have permanent consequences. Daniel looked at the monitor, then at the boy's small, fragile body, and felt a chill run through him. The child's eyes fluttered open, weak but conscious. Daniel whispered words of reassurance, though he knew words were insignificant against the relentless fragility of life. "This is real," Daniel murmured to Rex, voice barely audible. "The danger, it's not gone, it's never gone. Every second counts." Rex barked once more, soft but insistent, pawing at Daniel. The dog's gaze shifted toward the door, ears flicking. Daniel followed his line of sight and froze. A shadow moved outside the window, someone approaching, but with hurried, uneven steps. His heart raced. Another emergency, another complication. The paramedic noticed it too, calling out a warning, but Daniel's attention was drawn back to Rex. The dog's body was rigid, eyes sharp, sensing something Daniel could not yet interpret. And then Daniel understood. This was the consequence of lost seconds, compounded, rippling forward. Every misstep, every hesitation, every tiny delay had a cost, and sometimes that cost manifested in ways humans couldn't anticipate. The shadow outside was benign, a nurse bringing additional equipment, but the lesson remained stark. Life was fragile, fleeting, and unforgiving. One wrong move, one moment of doubt, could tip the scales irreversibly. Daniel knelt beside Rex, pressing a hand to the dog's neck. "We can't let it happen again," he whispered. "Not to him, not to anyone." The boy stirred again, small hands clinging to his mother. Daniel's chest tightened. He realized with chilling clarity that survival wasn't a single moment. It was constant vigilance, split-second decisions, and listening to instincts that humans often doubt. The K9 nudged Daniel's hand once more, eyes unwavering. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. Rex had been right all along. The warnings had been there, insistent, unavoidable. Daniel had acted, yes, but he had acted just in time. Too late for hesitation, too late for doubt, yet right for life. The paramedics stabilized the boy further, preparing for extended monitoring. The mother whispered endless thanks, her voice heavy with relief and exhaustion. Daniel nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the gravity of the moment. Outside, the sun set over Maplewood, casting long shadows over the quiet streets. The fair was long gone, replaced by the normal rhythms of town life. But for Daniel and Rex, the day would never end. The lessons, the near tragedy, the weight of seconds lost, and the price of hesitation would follow them always. Daniel rose, gripping Rex's leash tightly. The K9 remained at his side, alert, aware, the living embodiment of instincts and vigilance. Daniel understood that their work, their responsibility, never truly ended. As he walked out of the hospital, he glanced back at the boy's room one last time. The child was safe, for now, but Daniel knew the shadow of danger lingered, waiting for the slightest misstep. And deep in his chest, he felt the truth. Some lessons are learned too late, some dangers are always present, and sometimes, survival is nothing more than seconds caught just in time. Rex barked softly, nudging Daniel forward, and he followed, stepping into the fatting light, fully aware that the world was unforgiving. But at least for now, a life had been saved. The story was over for the public, but for Daniel Reyes and Rex, the real vigilance had only just begun.